Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. In the high-stakes ecosystem of American education, a silent but profound drama plays out every day in classrooms ranging from the sun-drenched kindergartens of California to the ivy-covered lecture halls of New England. It is a drama not of curriculum, funding, or standardized testing, but of motivation. Consider two students sitting side by side in an advanced placement history course. On the left is Marcus. Marcus is a distinct archetype known to every veteran teacher. He is laser-focused on the scoreboard. Before the teacher even finishes explaining an assignment on the French Revolution, Marcus's hand shoots up. How many points is this worth? Is this going to be graded on a curve? What do I need to get an A? Marcus treats his peers not as colleagues, but as rivals in a zero-sum game. Every point they lose is a competitive advantage for him. His drive is palpable, yet it is fragile. It is fueled by the need to prove his competence to an audience, his parents, the college admissions officers, or perhaps just his own insecurity. On the right sits Elena. She is wrestling with the same difficult text regarding Robespierre, but her internal monologue is fundamentally different. She is frustrated, frowning at the page, but she isn't looking at the clock or the gradebook. She approaches the teacher after the bell rings, not to haggle for partial credit, but to ask, "I don't get why the Jacobins turned on their allies. It doesn't make sense given their earlier speeches." Elena is driven by the need to improve her competence. For her, a gap in knowledge isn't a badge of shame. It's a puzzle to be solved. She views the grade as a lagging indicator of her learning, not the definition of her worth. These distinct mindsets are not merely personality quirks, nor are they accidents of birth. They are the observable outcomes of achievement goal theory, AGT. For the past 4 decades, AGT has stood as a titan in the field of educational psychology, providing a robust, empirically backed framework to understand the why behind student behavior. It moves beyond the simplistic notion that some students are motivated and others are lazy. Drilling down into the quality and orientation of that motivation, we will conduct a granular, deep dive analysis of AGT, exploring its historical evolution from the behaviorist era, dissecting its sophisticated 2x2 framework, examining the developmental middle school slump, and providing a comprehensive guide to the classroom structures and cultural contexts that shape how students learn. To truly get a handle on AGT, we must first understand the intellectual soil from which it grew. In the early 20th century, American education was dominated by behaviorism. Theorists like B.F. Skinner believed that motivation was a simple mechanical process of inputs and outputs. Reward a behavior, a gold star, a piece of candy, an A, and it increases. Punish it, detention, a bad grade, public shaming, and it decreases. In this view, the student was a black box. We didn't care what they thought, only how they behaved. However, the cognitive revolution of the 1960s and 70s threw a wrench in the works. Psychologists began to realize that human beings are not lab rats in a maze. We think, we interpret, we anticipate, and we set goals. The focus shifted from what students were doing to what they were thinking while they did it. It became clear that 2 students could get the same grade on a test, but have vastly different psychological experiences that would determine their future success. It was in this fertile ground that achievement goal theory took root in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Pioneers like Carol Dweck, John Nichols, and Martin Mayer began to notice that students with equal ability levels reacted wildly differently to failure. When faced with an impossible puzzle, some students crumbled, blaming their own lack of intelligence, the helpless response. Others rolled up their sleeves, viewing the failure as a cue to try a different strategy, the mastery-oriented response. The researchers hypothesized that these reactions were driven by the underlying goals the students were pursuing. The initial iteration of the theory was a binary model, black and white in its distinctions. 1. Mastery goals, also known as learning goals or task goals, the desire to develop competence, acquire new skills, and understand the material. The focus is on the self and the task. 2. Performance goals, also known as ego goals or ability goals, the desire to demonstrate competence relative to others. The focus is on the audience and the ranking. In this early era, the lines were drawn clearly in the sand. Mastery goals were the hero. Performance goals were the villain. Mastery goals were linked to deep learning, persistence, and high intrinsic motivation. Performance goals were linked to surface-level memorization, anxiety, and the avoidance of challenge. The advice to teachers was simple and direct. Promote mastery, crush performance. But as we would soon find out, human psychology is rarely that simple. As research matured into the 1990s, the binary model began to show cracks. Empirical data revealed a performance paradox. Some students who were obsessed with outperforming their peers were actually high achievers who used deep learning strategies. They were competitive, yes, but they weren't dysfunctional. In fact, in competitive environments like law school or medical school, this competitive drive seemed almost necessary for survival. This led researchers like Andrew Elliott to introduce the concept of valence, the direction of the motivation. Were students running towards success, approach, or running away from failure, avoidance? This insight birthed the trichotomous framework: mastery, performance approach, performance avoidance, and eventually the modern 2x2 achievement goal framework. This 2x2 matrix is the gold standard for understanding student motivation today. Let's break down each quadrant with a fine-toothed comb to understand the mechanics of each mindset. Mastery approach goals, the ideal learner. Definition: focusing on mastering the task, learning new skills, and improving upon one's past performance. The mindset: I want to learn this because it is interesting and I want to get better at it. Behaviors: these students bite the bullet when tasks get hard. They view effort as a necessity for success, not a sign of weakness. They engage in metacognition, thinking about their own thinking. If they fail a test, they don't hide it. They analyze their errors to plug the gaps in their knowledge. They ask for help not to get the answer, but to understand the process. Outcomes: high intrinsic motivation, long-term retention of material, and emotional resilience. They are the lifelong learners who read nonfiction for fun. Crucially, they experience failure as informative, not indicting. 2. Mastery avoidance goals. The perfectionist's trap. Definition: focusing on avoiding misunderstanding or avoiding the loss of skill. The mindset: I just need to make sure I don't mess this up, or I hope I don't forget what I learned last year. The context: this is common among experts, an aging athlete trying not to lose a step, or high-achieving perfectionists. It hasn't been studied as much as the others, but it is prevalent in high-stakes environments where falling behind is a major fear. Outcomes: these students work hard, but the work is stressful. They are organized and thorough, but they lack the joy and creative risk-taking of the approach-oriented learner. They are often running on a treadmill of anxiety, terrified that they are peaking. 3. Performance approach goals. The competitor. Definition: focusing on demonstrating superior competence relative to others. The mindset: I want to be the best in the class. I want to beat the curve, or I want to show everyone how smart I am. The nuance. This is where the theory gets interesting. For years, educators thought this was bad. But for some students, competition is a powerful fuel. In a competitive college admissions landscape, this goal orientation is highly adaptive for short-term success. Outcomes: high grades and strong test scores. However, this often comes with a cram and dump strategy. These students memorize facts for the test and purge them immediately after. Their self-worth is often tethered to their ranking, making them vulnerable to anxiety. If they stop winning, they stop functioning. 4. Performance avoidance goals. The silent struggle. Definition: focusing on avoiding the demonstration of incompetence relative to others. The mindset: I just don't want to look stupid. I hope the teacher doesn't call on me, or I just want to get through this without being embarrassed. Oh, behaviors. These students are walking on eggshells. They engage in self-handicapping, deliberately sabotaging their own success, e.g., procrastinating, not studying, partying the night before a test, so they have an excuse for failure other than a lack of ability. It is a psychological defense mechanism. I didn't fail because I'm dumb. I failed because I didn't try. Outcomes. This is the danger zone. It is linked to low grades, high anxiety, cheating, learned helplessness, and eventually dropping out. It is a tragedy of potential loss to fear. Why do these different goals lead to such vastly different outcomes? It isn't magic, it's biology. The different goal orientations trigger different cognitive loads and neural pathways that directly impact the brain's ability to process information. Cognitive load theory plays a huge role here. The human brain has a limited amount of working memory, the mental scratch pad used to process new information. Performance avoidance goals are mentally expensive. Imagine a student taking a complex math test. A mastery approach student has 100% of their working memory dedicated to solving the quadratic equation. A performance avoidance student might have 40% of their working memory dedicated to the math, but the other 60% is occupied by intrusive thoughts. Everyone else is writing faster than me. If I fail this, my parents will kill me. The teacher is looking at me. They are effectively trying to solve the problem with half a brain. This worry tax cripples their performance, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure. They aren't failing because they lack the skill. They are failing because their bandwidth is clogged with anxiety. Furthermore, these goals affect help-seeking behavior. For a mastery student, asking for help is an instrumental strategy, a tool to fix a problem, like a mechanic reaching for a wrench. For a performance student, asking for help is an admission of defeat. If the goal is to look smart, asking a question proves you aren't. Consequently, the students who need help the most are usually the last ones to ask for it, sitting in silence while they fall further behind. One of the most depressing findings in educational psychology is the predictable decline in motivation as children age. Walk into a first-grade classroom and almost every hand shoots up when a question is asked, regardless of whether they know the answer. Walk into a ninth-grade classroom and you can hear a pin drop. This phenomenon is often called the middle school slump. Young children are naturally mastery-oriented. They are biologically wired to learn. A toddler learning to walk doesn't look around to see if other toddlers are walking better. They just keep getting back up. They have an incremental view of ability by default. They believe that doing something more makes you better at it. However, as students move through the American school system, the environment shifts around them. 1. Evaluative pressure. Grades become public, high stakes, and permanent. 2. Tracking. Students are separated into honors and remedial tracks, cementing a fixed view of ability. The smart kids get the enrichment, the slow kids get the drills. 3. Impersonal environment. Students move from a single nurturing teacher to a carousel of subject-specific teachers, reducing the personal connection that fosters psychological safety. 4. Social comparison. Adolescence brings a heightened awareness of peer status. This structural shift nudges students away from mastery and toward performance. They learn that school isn't about learning, it's about sorting. They stop asking why and start asking, is this on the test? They learn to play the game of school rather than engage in the process of education.